All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let's begin. A lot to do today. Beautiful, beautiful Gemara ahead of us. Shabbos, say, so today's daf is Pei Zayin 87. We are picking up at the Gemara. We finished the Mishnah yesterday, so on 87a, 2, 4, 6 lines down from the top. Says the Gemara, Ein Mevi'in. Remember again, we're talking about the types of wine that are usable for sacrificial purposes in the Beis HaMikdash. So remember again, the Gemara says, Ein Mevi'in lo masuk v'lo mavushal v'lo mu'ushan. The halacha is you cannot bring sweet wine, you cannot bring cooked wine, and you cannot bring smoked wine. Vim heavy puzzle. And if you brought any of these types of wines, ultimately again, whatever sacrificial service you're engaged in is fundamentally puzzle. Ay, v'hakatani reisha, ein mevi'in es halistion. So here's the contradiction. The Mishnah said that you should not bring hilistion wine. If you remember again, what was hilistion wine? It was sweet wine, late harvest wine. Grapes that were left in the sun for a longer amount of time, therefore again became sweeter. So ideally you're not supposed to bring this type of wine, but if you did, it's kosher. So I'll say, so here's we have a problem. Because again, here we have the Brisa telling us that you can't bring any type of sweet wine. Yet the Mishnah told me that hilistion wine, in fact, is going to be okay. Hilistion wine is sweet wine. So what's the halacha? So we'll say two answers. Amar Ravina kroch v'tani. So what Ravina says, group it all together. And actually, the way you're supposed to read it is that all types of sweet wine are aser. All types of sweet wine are aser. Rashi says, kroch v'tani, ein mevin hilistion, lefishen mevin lo masog vim heavy pasol. So in fact, what Ravina understands is that don't read it like the Mishnah, rather read it like the Brisa. All types of sweet wine are going to be pasol for Beis HaMikdash use, and therefore again, wine that comes from hilistion grapes or hilistion wine will be pasol as well. But Ravashi says, no, don't group them together. Rather, we'll say there are different types of sweet wine. Chuya deshimsha lo mois. We'll say sometimes wine is sweet because the grapes are dafka left out for longer. See, if you have late harvest wine, lo mois. It's interesting. It says that's not disgusting. So meaning not disgusting, we'll say means what? That it's usable. One would be permitted to use such wine bidi evet. Obviously, you could see that Chazal did not regard sweet wine as quality wine, and therefore again halacha l'maisa, if it is late harvest wine, if it was left out on the vines and aged, so you could use it. However, chuya de pera mois. But I will say if the wine is sweet because the fruit is weak, then ultimately, again, that's considered to be an inferior type of pri, and therefore that type of wine may not be used. Ein Mevi'in Yashan Divrei Rabbi v'cham machshir. So we'll say, remember again, next machlokes in the Mishnah was you can't use old wine. Can't use old wine. Now Rashi pointed out over here that old wine means wine from last year. So remember again, we had a machlokes in the Gemara. Rabbi says you cannot use old wine, and the Chachamim say you can. Says Gemara, Amar Chizkiah, my time at the Rabbi. Why doesn't Rabbi want you using wine from last year, or aged wine? So Amar Kra, La Keves Yayin. Because the pasuk says La Keves Yayin. So remember again, the pasuk over here is talking about the nesachim, which ultimately accompany the animal offerings, or Visyayin La Keves Yayin. Talking about the libation that accompanies the offering of the keves, of the lamb, of the sheep. Ma Keves Ben Shnaso. Af yayin ben shnaso. Supposed to the Gemara makes an interesting limud. Just like the keves that is brought has to be under a year old, so too the wine that is brought also has to be under a year old. I ma keves ben shtei shanim pasol. Af yayin ben shtei shanim pasol. Therefore, he says the Gemara, if that's the case, then just as if the keves is 2 years old, it is pasol. So too wine that is 2 years old will also be pasol. The chitei mahachinami. So maybe you'll say, yes, this is indeed the case. V'hatanya, here's the problem. Yayin ben shtei shanim lo yavi. You shouldn't bring wine that is more than 2 years old, or 2 years old as nesachim, them heavy kosher. And ultimately, again, what's the halacha will say? If you did so, it's still b'di evet kosher. Man shamis le da'amar lo yavi. Who was one who told us that you can't bring old wine? Rabbi. It's Rabbi. Vika amar, and yet again, what does it say over here? Im heavy kosher. If you went ahead and you brought it, it is kosher. Ela amar rava hainu taima de Rabbi. Dichsiv al teira yain ki yis adam. So I say rather it comes down to what is Rebbe's issue. Rabbi's issue is as follows: that there was, when it comes to wine, one of the defining characteristics of wine is its redness, right? Is the intensity of its color. So apparently, Rabbi say, and again, so much of what we're learning over here is a function of how they made wine bisman hagimara. Meaning, as we're going to discuss in just a little bit, so we know that halacha l'maisa, when they created wine, what they really created was what? Wine concentrate, which was then subsequently, so in other words, when you went to the store, you bought wine concentrate. You brought that home, and you went ahead and diluted that. So obviously the qualities and characteristics of their wines were just different than what we have today. Because, for example, even on a basic level, we're thinking to ourselves, we always assume, at least contemporarily, that aged wine certainly will be superior to quote-unquote newer wine. And in fact, by the way, in other places the Gemara talks about that as well. What's happening over here, says the Gemara, according to Rabbi, is actually not necessarily a quality of taste, but rather, again, the color. At least in Talmudic wines, the redness was most pronounced and most intense in the first year after production. After the first year, the redness would fade. Because one of the defining characteristics of wine, based on this pasuk in Tehillim, is in Mishlei, Altera Yayin Kiyis Adam. Yayin is defined as Adam. Yayin is defined ultimately again as red. Therefore, says Rabbi, you really should only use wine ultimately that what is within 1 year old, because that is when the color will be strongest. And I both say, it happens to be the Rambam doesn't paskin like Rabbi, we paskin like the Chachamim, and therefore again, even Yayin Yashan, even old wine is going to be okay. We'll discuss how we paskin in accordance with a number of different of these approaches in just a little bit. Next, Ein Mavia Mina Dalios. So we'll say, remember again, the Mishnah also says something very interesting, which is we do not bring from vines which grow on trellises. Rather, we only bring from grapes that come from vines which grow on the ground. Uminakramim ha'avudim, and from vineyards which are worked. So the Gemara says, Tana kramim ha'avudim pa'amayim b'shana. This refers ultimately again to vineyards which are plowed a minimum of twice a year. So the Gemara just tells us about the power of plowing vineyards. So Rav Yosef Havale Karna de Pardesa. Rav Yosef had a corner of a vineyard. The Rafik Be Tvei. And Rabbi say he used to plow it often. Now Rashi says over here, the Rafik Be Tvei Rivka. He would go ahead and plow it more than the norm. Now if you look at Rashi for just a moment, Rashi in the Kisvei on the bottom, pretty much like right in the middle, Tvei Rivka, Chofro Pam Yisera, Kilomar Pa'amayim B'shana. Instead of just plowing it once a year, he would plow it twice a year. And I will say, as a result of working the soil just a little bit extra, what happened? Listen to this. Va'avad chamra didari maya achad trim. He produced grapes that produced a wine concentrate that was so powerful that it required a 6-to-1 dilution ratio. 6 parts water to 1 part wine. So you will say the Gemara operates under the normal understanding that halacha l'maisa, normally for dilution purposes, it's usually 2 parts water for every 1 part wine. His grapes were so intense that it was 6 parts water to 1 part wine. So you see here the benefits of multiple plowings of the field, multiple workings of the field. Good. Lo hayu konsin osa bechatzavin gidolim. So let's remember again, the Mishnah also said, we do not store the wine for nesachim in large barrels. Rather, again, the lashon of the Mishnah was, ela bechavios kitanos. We fill it up in small barrels. So the Gemara says, Tana, chavios, what type of chavios? Kadios, ludios, ubenunios. Both say, so apparently, the Gemara just identifying the type of barrels they used to use. They used to use mid-sized Ludian barrels. Okay? In manichin osan stein. Furthermore, again, when storing these barrels, we do not store them one next to the other, shtayim. Ella, achas. Rather, we store them, each of them, one. In other words, we don't store them next to each other. Rather, we store them one without storing another one next to it. Look at Rashi. In manichin osan stein. This is actually very interesting. Zu bitzad zu. We don't store the barrels one next to the other. Shema yiskalkel achos, because if one of the barrels goes bad, right, turns sour. Vitariach chaverta utikalkel gam hi. It's actually very interesting. What are we concerned about? We're concerned about that if wine in one of the barrels sours, then what will happen? Apparently, again, the putrid odor from one barrel will travel to the next and potentially adversely affect the other barrel. Therefore, again, we don't store the barrels one exactly next to the other, but apparently there was some amount of significant space between one barrel and its fellow barrel. Very interesting. Next, Ketzad Bodkin. So we'll say, so this actually was quite amazing. So the Gemara says over here, if you remember again, the Mishnah said, so how would they get which wine would they use for Nesachim? So remember again, the Mishnah said, we don't want to use the wine from the top of the barrel. We don't want to use the wine from the bottom of the barrel. So what do we want to use? From the middle third. So what would they do? They would put the spigot in, right by the middle third of the barrel. You had two guys, the spigot guy, the gizbar. Spigot guy is taking the wine out of the barrel, and the gizbar is standing there. The gizbar standing there with a reed, and when they have enough, the gizbar would tap the spigot guy on the shoulder with his reed, tell him to shut off the spigot. So the Gemara says, Ketzad bodek gizbar, yoshev v'kana biyado, zara kagir hikish v'kana. So the Mishnah said again, what would the gizbar do? He would stand there with his reed, and ultimately again, when the froth would come out, when they would get out enough wine, hikish hak b'kana. So the gizbar would tap the other guy with his reed on the shoulder. Tana, zara kagir shel shmarim. So we'll say as soon as the froth came out and the initial dregs came out as well, and they got the necessary wine out, Gizbar hikish b'kana. The gizbar went ahead and tapped the spigot guy on the shoulder. Why doesn't he just say? I mean, why do you have to have this complex process? No, it's not so complex. Why do you have to have this process of the gizbar tapping the guy on the shoulder with the reed? Just say, shut the spigot, right? Same thing. Just tell him what to do. To which the Gemara says is actually amazing. Both say this goes in accordance with Rabbi Yochanan. Da Amar Rabbi Yochanan Kishim Shadibor Yafal Besamim Kach Dibor Ra Liyayin. So this is an amazing statement. The same way that speech is helpful for incense, for besamim, speech is detrimental for wine. So I'll say this is actually quite amazing that Chazal operated under the assumption that there are certain activities which happen around wine which are detrimental for wine. Now it's dafka wine, so for whatever the reason Chazal felt that speech, right, talking, when in the preparation of wine, has a detrimental impact on wine. Whether this was a spiritual detriment, whether this was some type of qualitative detriment, that's what Chazal felt. I will say, by the way, the Gemara discusses that when they used to go ahead and prepare the ketores for the Besam for the ketores, they dafka would speak. They would say hadek, chop it up finally, because the kol is yofel besamim. So we'll say, so because the kol is ra liyayin, we'll say, by the way, if you think about it, whatever it means on an actual level, it's a profound statement that anything and everything we do has an impact on what happens in the world around us in some way. See, sometimes we do things in life because we think that our actions don't really make a difference. I could do X and it's not really going to have an impact on anything specific. But it's not true. Every word we say, every action we do, every decision we make has an impact. And I will say it has an impact on multiple levels, even to the wine, even to the besamim. That's why a person has to be so incredibly vigilant as to what they say, when they say it, how they conduct themselves. Because even the smallest of actions which we consider to be insignificant has a universal significance, often which we cannot see, often which we cannot comprehend, and sometimes which we cannot even measure. But there is no such thing as a word, no such thing as a tenua, as an action, no such thing as a decision that doesn't have a ripple effect, that doesn't have an impact. So the Gemara goes weiter. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda Omer, by Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara asked the question now. The Gemara kept asking on a variety of different occasions. So hekdishu mahu sheyelake ala mishum balmum. But if you took any of these wines, right? That I'm sorry. This is actually Rabbi Yosef Yehuda mentioned in the Mishnah that if there's any kimach, remember again, kimach literally means like particles of grain, but in fact for our purposes over here, what it means is particles of mold. If there's any mold in the wine, particles of mold, so that renders the wine unfit for sacrificial use. So now the Gemara asks, okay, if you took that wine and you were makdish that wine, What's the halacha? Mahu sheyelake alov. Ultimately, again, would you get malchus for that? Mishum balmum. Rav says we've already established on Shabbos his daf. If you're makdish a balmum, what's the halacha? You get malchus. So the shaila is, if you go ahead and you're makdish wine which has mold in it, so do you get malchus for being makdish a balmum or not? Kevan the pasuk balmum dummy. Do we say that since it's pasuk, ultimately again it's like a balmum, therefore you get malchus? Or do we say no? Your only time you get malchus for a balmum is by a behema, but not for wine? To which the Gemara answers, Teiku. We'll have to leave it to Eliyahu Hanavi. Tan Rabbanan. But it's actually a beautiful Gemara. Elim mimoav. So when the Gemara was saying, now the Gemara is telling us where they used to get the best items for the Beis Hamikdash. So Elim, rams, used to come from Moav. Kivasim mechevron, right? And raising of sheep used to come from Chevron. Agolim, calves, misharon, from the Sharon area. Gozlos meharamelech. Gozlos came from this place called Haramelech. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, mevian kavasim shegafan kirachman. This is actually a beautiful Gemara. They would only bring sheep, right, whose height was like their width, right? Zaftig sheep, right? If you're going to bring sheep, you don't want any sheep on a diet, right? You don't want any scrawny sheep. You don't want any little sheep. You want zaftig sheep. You want that they should be as wide as they are tall. Amar Rava bar Rav Shila. My time is Rabbi Yehuda. What's Rabbi Yehuda's logic? T'chsev yira miknecha bayomahu kar nirchav. So let's say dashes from the word kar nirchav. It should be wide. Ksiv. Let's say another beautiful Gemara. Al chamoseich Yerushalayim. Hifkareti shormim kol hayom v'chol halayla. So let's say, so the pasuk Gemara over here quotes the pasuk from Yeshaya. Literally, al chamoseich Yerushalayim, on the walls of Yerushalayim. Hifkareti shormim kol hayom v'chol halayla. Which Baruch Hu says, I have placed watchmen, guards, kol hayom v'chol halayla, all day and all night. Tamid lo yechashu hamaskirim es. Tamid lo yechashu. They are never quiet. They are never silenced. Hamaskirim es Hashem al dami lachem. Ultimately, again, those who remember God do not to be silent. So my Amri will say, when these guards, when these watchmen stand on the walls of Yerushalayim, ultimately, again, what do they say? What do they say? Hachi Amar Rava bar Rav Shila, atot takum tirachim tzion. What they say is, they call out, the watchmen of the walls of Yerushalayim call out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Atot takum HaKadosh Baruch Hu, get up, stand up, tirachim tzion, and have compassion upon Sion. So these watchmen stand up, and ultimately, what do? They go ahead and they daven for divine compassion on Yerushalayim. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Bonei Yerushalayim. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, they say, build, keep on building Jerusalem. Umeikara mai havi amri. And we'll say, so again, remember, this is what they're saying now after Yerushalayim, after the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed. So what they're saying ultimately is, get up, have compassion upon Sion. Ultimately, again, they're saying, Bone Yerushalayim Hashem, Ribono Shel Olam, go ahead and rebuild Jerusalem. So that's what they say now in the aftermath of destruction. But Meikara Mehavi Amri, what did they say when Yerushalayim stood? What did they say when the Beis Hamikdash stood? Amarav bar Rav Shila, Ki Bachar Hashem b'Tzion, Iva lemoshav lo. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu chose Tzion, Iva lemoshav lo, it was his desired habitation. What's that beautiful Gemara? I'll just say, interestingly enough, just before we finish up this parak, so remember again, so the Rambam, these halachos that we've seen by Yayin, we've kind of worked through them all in the Gemara in terms of which wines are fit for use in the Beis Hamikdash, which wines are not fit in the Beis Hamikdash. So I'll say, so remember again, one of the things, the Gemara doesn't talk about it because it's kind of obvious, which is the Gemara passes mevushal wine for use in the Beis Hamikdash. You cannot use wine that is mevushal, ultimately again for carbonic purposes. So I'll tell you something very interesting about this. So the Rambam actually paskins in Hilchos Kiddush, by Hilchos Shabbos, the Rambam says that for wine for Kiddush has to be yayin haroi linasech al gabi hamizbeach. That for wine for Kiddush, the Rambam says it has to be wine that is fit for libational purposes on the Mizbeach. So the Rambam paskins. So there's a big discussion exactly what that means, what the Rambam's coming to say. Is Rambam saying that it just has to be quality wine that you use for your Kiddush? He's saying it actually has to conform to the halachos. So Soloveitchik has a whole piece where he actually explains that the Rambam is actually coming to say that the details, ultimately again for libational wine, are the same for Kiddush wine, which is interesting enough why the Rav was makbid to only use non-mavushal wine for Kiddush. The Rav would not use mavushal wine for Kiddush based on this halacha that it has to be yayin haroi linasech al gabi hamizbeach. So I'll tell you something interesting that I saw brought down. So many people, this was the Rav's idea. One, if you're looking for something to take on in your Yiddishkeit, this is not the thing, right? There are many other things that a person should work on. Don't worry about this as much. But I will tell you something very interesting, which is where this is brought down in other places, which is by Dalet Kosos. By Dalet Kosos, you find by the poskim, by the 4 cups, by the Pesach Seder, dafka an idea to use non-mavushal wine. Dafka to use non-mavushal wine. Because again, out of the idea that non-mavushal wine has a stronger element of cherus, usually considered to be a higher quality, as evidenced by the fact that it's royal nasech hagabi hamizbeach, dalet kosos, which are there as a manifestation of cherus, newfound freedom. Ultimately, again, one should try to use that type of wine. That's royal nasech hagabi hamizbeach. Again, it's not the halacha. One could go ahead and use any kind of wine that's fit for use. Ultimately, but again, it's just interesting to see how some of these halachos that apply by the Beis HaMikdash have ramifications for us as well. Beautiful. Hadjun Allah, Kol Kavanot Sira. We'll say, new parak, very exciting. Shtei midos shal yavesh hayu b'mikdash. We'll say, ultimately, again, there were two different measures used, called dry measures, used inside of the Beis HaMikdash. What were they? Isaron v'chatzi isaron. We'll say isaron and a half an isaron. These were the two measures. One Meir says there are actually 3 different measures. There are 2 types of isaron measurements, and one which was called the chatzi isaron. Mahaya mishamish, right? Mahaya mishamish. Shebo haya modi l'chol menachos. We'll say, what would we use the isaron measure? Because literally it was a utensil of an isaron. What would we use the isaron measure for? We'll say the isaron measure was used for menachos. Because menachos, remember again, take an isaron of flour. Therefore, again, lo hayamoded lo b'shlosh lepar, lo b'shal shnaim la'ayil, ela modedin esron. So we'll say it's actually very interesting. We're going to get into this, but we're going to see that there are certain sacrifices which require more than an isaron. Ultimately, again, more than an isaron of flour. So, for example, some need 2, some need 3. But in the Beis HaMikdash, we always measured using a utensil which contained an isaron and no more. So, for example, if you had a carbon that required 3 esronos, you would fill up that utensil 3 different times. So, really, what we're seeing over here is there was an isaron utensil and a chatzi isaron utensil. But that was it. Chatzi isaron mahaya mishamish. What would they use the chatzi isaron, the half in isaron utensil for? So the Gemara says, because remember again, the Kohen Gadol would bring a minchas chavitin every single day. It was a half an isaron in the morning, a half an isaron in the afternoon. So they would measure out the half an isaron ultimately in that utensil. Says the Gemara Tanya, Rabbi Meir says, what does the pasuk mean when it says isaron lakevas ha'echad? Melamed. So we'll say. So what's interesting is, remember, it's 1 isaron. The carbon here that being referenced over here gets 1 isaron. So why isaron? Melamed shishte esaron hayu b'mikdash. It teaches us. This is Rabbi Meir's shita. Rabbi Meir says the opinion that says that there were 3 different types of utensils. There were 2 isaron utensils and 1 chatzi isaron utensil. Ultimately, against it says the Gemara, what does it mean isaron? So echad gadosh ve'echad machuk. We'll say one was for what we call a heaped isaron, and one was for a leveled isaron. We'll say what that means is as follows. One of the measurements was a heap, which meant it only contained the full isaron when you heaped on the flour above the rim, the top rim of the kli. Versus the second type of utensil, which was also called an isaron measure. I will say, but the way it was used is the inside contained an isaron of flour. So the way you measured is you leveled off the top. Ultimately, again, it was these utensils which were used to measure out the flour for all of the menachos. Amadeus. Machuk shebo. What would you use the leveled one for? Hayamode lechavite kohen gadol. So as I say, interestingly enough, in Rabbi Meir's model, so you would use ultimately again the gadush shebo. You would use what we call the heaped utensil, the utensil that you would measure up by heaping the grain, by heaping the flour. That would be used for general menachos. The machuk, the leveled measure, that was hayamodi lechavite kohen gadol. That was used ultimately again for the chavitin of the kohen gadol. The chachamim say lo haya sham ela isaron echad. The chachamim say no, there was only one utensil. It was only one utensil, only one isaron measure. Shene emar the isaron echad lakeves echad. Because the pasuk says one isaron for one keves. Im kain ma tamud lomar isaron. If that's the case, then what do we do with the double lashon? So we'll say, Rabbi, just so you hold cup over here. In Rabbi Meir's model, the pasuk says isaron. Why? To teach me what? There are two types of isaron measuring utensils. What about now measuring utensils? There are two types of utensils. There was what he calls an isaron gadush, an isaron heaped utensil, and an isaron machuk, an isaron leveled utensil. The leveled utensil was used ultimately again for the chavite kohen gadol, right? That's what he owes. They measure out the flour for the kohen gadol's special mincha offering, daily mincha offering. The gadush was used for all other menachos. So fine, I understand then why it says isaron. But according to the chachamim who say that no, it's not true, there was only one isaron utensil, then what do they do with the pasuk that says isaron? Torah says it twice. What do you do with that? L'rabos chatzi isar. Because it was in the chachamim's model there were two utensils. There was one utensil ultimately again that was measured in isaron, and one utensil which measured what? A chatzi isaron, a half an isaron. For Rabbi Meir, when Rabbi Meir says chatzi isaron minale, where does Rabbi Meir know? Now, remember again, here's what everyone agrees on. Everyone agrees that there was one isaron utensil and there was a second chatzi isaron utensil. Everyone agrees on that. The point of contention, Rabbi was there a second isaron utensil or not? Rabbi Meir says yes, Chachamim say no. So if Rabbi Meir is learning out isaron to teach me two isaron utensils, Chachamim saying isaron teaches me one isaron, one chatzi isaron. So where does Rabbi Meir learn out the chatzi isaron utensil from? Nafkalei me v'isaron. Right, he learns out from the extra vav. That vav is come to be most of something additional. So interestingly enough, he learns out from the isaron, the vav comes to teach you the chatzi isaron utensil. For Rabbanon, the Rabbanon will say vav lo darshi. The Rabbanon don't darshin the vav. Rabbi Meir, hi v'isaron echad lekevasa echad my avdilei. So we'll say the problem is what does Rabbi Meir do with the phrase isaron echad lekevasa echad? So we'll say remember again the Chachamim use that to teach me that there's only one isaron utensil. What does Rabbi Meir use that to teach me for? So the Gemara says my avilei hahu shelo yimdod lo b'shel shlosh lepar v'lo b'shel shnayim la'ayu. So what Rabbi Meir tells me that comes to teach me the isaron echad lekevasa echad comes to teach me that what? There are other animal offerings, I will say, which require more than one isaron. So I might have thought, so for example, as the pasuk says, you have to go ahead and what? You have to bring 3 isaronos for the par and 2 for the ayil. I might have thought that halacha l'maisa should have a utensil that is the size of 3 isaronos, the size of 2 isaronos. Kamash malon, no. Right? So therefore, again, the pasuk teaches me v'isaron echad lakeves echad teaches me shelo yimdod lo b'shal shlosha lepar. I do not make a 3 isaron utensil for the par, nor do I make for lo b'shal shnayim la'ayil, nor do I make a 2 isaron utensil for the ayil. V'rabbanon, where did the Rabbanon learn that from? Nafka lehu minikudo. We'll say they learned that out from the dot on top of the word. What is this referring to? Here we go. Disanya. Am Rabbi Yossi. Lama nokut vav sheva emtzi isaron. We'll say, why is there a dot by the middle of the vav of isaron? The Gemara says, shal isaron rishon shal yom tav rishon shal chag. We'll say that's talking about by the isaron. The vav in the middle of the word isaron, by the first isaron mentioned by the first day of Sukkot, teaching me what? Shalo yimdod lo b'shal gimel lapar. So we'll say, interestingly enough, that dot is there for emphasis purposes. To teach me that what? I only go ahead and make a utensil the size of 1 isaron, and I do not go ahead and make a utensil that is 2 esronos or 3 esronos. For Rabbi Meir, nikudo lo darish. And Rabbi Meir ultimately, again, does not darshan the dots. So we'll say, so halacha l'maisa, we see a fundamental machlokes in Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim, And this is interesting. This is a machlokes about what utensils they had in the mikdash. This is literally what they're arguing about. Chachamim say they had two utensils. One which was a isaron utensil. One which was a chatzi isaron utensil. Rabbi Meir telling us they had three utensils. One which was two which were isaron utensils. One was a gadush, one was a machuk, one was a piled measuring utensil, one was a leveled measuring utensil, and a chatzi isaron utensil. And they both darshan it based on the psukim. Again, we'll see how the Rama paskins in a little bit. Chatzi isaron, actually tomorrow. Chatzi isaron mahayu misham, yishba yimodin lechavidi kan god. It's supposed to say, remember again, what did they use the half isaron utensil for? Ultimately, again, that was used for the chavite kohen gadol. That ultimately again was used to measure out the kohen gadol's special daily mincha offering. So the Gemara says, Modei, is that true that we would measure it out? Or minhi? Let's analyze this. Chavite kohen gadol lo hayu ba'in chatzain ela mevi isaron shalem. Supposed to listen to this. This brisa, supposed to say what that sounds like over here is as follows. Remember the way the chavitin worked was, chavitin were offered up in two parts in the day. They were offered up in the morning and in the afternoon. The chavitin in its entirety was comprised of one isaron of fine flour. But what it does was it was split in half. So the way the Mishnah makes it sound was that they brought the flour for the chavitin in two stages. They used the half isaron utensil, took a half isaron in the morning, took a half isaron in the afternoon. Shalom al Yisrael. The price says something different. Remini, that's not how they did it. Chavite kohen gadol lo hayubain chatzan. In fact, that's not true. They would not go ahead and bring a half an isaron of flour. Ella, rather what they would do is mevi isaron shalem v'chotzeu. They will say the way they would do it is they would fill up a utensil, one isaron utensil, filled with an isaron of fine flour, v'chotzeu, and then they would divide it up. Amar Rav Sheshes, my moded nami diktani mechalik. Enoch Inam Rav Sheshes says, what does it mean when they say measured it? It means they would split it up. So we'll say what's happening over here is it sounds like from the Bryce. So now we're gonna delve into this more, but it sounds like we have a major machlokes as to how the minchas chavitin was prepared. Was it just that they brought in the isaron full of flour and they went ahead and just divided it up, or did they use the half isaron utensil at two times during the day to bring the necessary amount of flour? So you'll say to yourself, who cares? Now it matters a lot because remember Rabbi say, and this is incredible. And this is the Musar from the Beis Hamikdash. When it comes to Avod in the Beis Hamikdash, it is all about what? It is all about the details. It's not just about getting the job done. It's all about the details. That's why the Beis Hamikdash represents such an incredible paradigm for avoda, for life, because life is all about the details. So if you get the details wrong, even if somehow you manage to get the end result right, the end result is wrong. If the details are wrong, the result is wrong. So knowing, am I bringing one utensil of an isaron and splitting up that flour into two parts, or bringing a half an isaron makes all the difference in the world. Rami Bar Chama Rav Chisda. So Rami Bar Chama asked the following Rav Chisda. Chatzi isaron the Rabbi Meir, gadush haya umachuk haya. We'll say interesting kasha. According to Rabbi Meir, when Rabbi Meir says that halacha l'maisa they would bring a chatzi isaron in the morning, chatzi isaron in the afternoon, for the minchas chavitin of the kohen gadol, was it a piled measure or a leveled measure? So just ask about the nature of the utensil. Was it the kind of utensil of Osai that had less, what we'll call less airspace? So the way you made up the certain amount was that you had to pile the flour on top of the lip of the kli, or that no, the kli itself contained a measure of an isaron. So by Rabbi Meir, Gadashaya Machukaya, Vitibaylacha, the Rabbanon. So I don't understand why only ask this kasha on the Rabbanon? On Rabbi Meir. Is this not also kasha on the Rabbanon? To which the Gemara said, the Rabbanon isaron gufei kami boilehu, Gadush haya o machok haya. So we'll say again, the Rabbanon also we ask the same kasha, right? Was it machok? Was it Gadush? Amarlei mid Rabbi Meir nishma Rabbi Meir. Excuse me. Amarlei, he says to him, mid Rabbi Meir nishma le Rabbi Meir, umid Rabbi Meir nishma le Rabbanon. So we'll say the truth is by answering it up according to Rabbi Meir, we can answer Rabbi Meir, we can answer the Rabbanon. Mida Amar Rabbi Meir isaron machuk, chatzi isaron nami machuk. We will say from the fact that Rabbi Meir held that the initial isaron was an isaron machuk, he held that ultimately again when measuring out the isaron, the saron for the Chavite Kohen Gadol was Machuk, the Rabbanon Nami Machuk. And therefore, ultimately, again, for the Rabbanon, in their Chatzi Isaron measure, it was also Machuk, also leveled. Rami Bar Chama Rav Chisda. Chavite Kohen Gadol, listen to this. B'ma Machalkan. Now we're switching gears here a little bit. We're going now, ultimately, again, from transitioning from a conversation about the flour to something different. Look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, B'ma Machalka. Look at Rashi in the Kisvei Yad, the bottom part of Rashi, 4 lines down, middle of the line. So the question the Gemara is asking over here, with what do you split the Chavite Kohen Gadol? Right, Rashi in Kisema Mechalka, Shemechalka Ha'isa Lechalos Shiba Sheish Chalos B'Boker V'Sheish B'Ayin. Both say the summit over here is in the dough stage. In the dough stage, when you're making one big dough, and you have to separate because it's 6 loaves in the morning. We're going to get into this. 6 loaves in the morning, 6 loaves in the afternoon. What are you splitting the dough with? B'ma mechalka. The Gemara says, B'ma mechalka lechalos. What are you splitting the dough with? Biyad or b'kli? Are you splitting the dough with your hand? Or are you splitting it with utensil? We'll say, look at Rashi for just a moment. Biyad below mida. And we'll say, obviously, if you're doing it with your hand, it's a bit more imprecise. So it's a bit more imprecise. Or b'kli, or for example, do you do it with a utensil? B'mida. Shaminachos the bows SR. Okay, fine. So you're doing it with your hand or you're doing it with the utensil? We should both say is a more fundamental question of is this have to be precision or a bit imprecise? So pshita debiyad. It's obvious that you're separating out the dough, or when I say separating the dough by hand and not with a kli. De'i bekli tortani yachnis. Because if you're separating it with the kli, are you then going to tell me that you're going to bring in a scale to the Beis HaMikdash? Now look at Rashi again for just a moment. Rashi says, Tortani Yachnis, still Rashi Kisveyad. Vichim Bishkol Osmaos Naim Yachnis Ba'azara. So what the Gemara is saying is as follows. If you're going to tell me you're going to need a kli, that means you want to be very precise with the division of the dough. If you're going to be so precise, you're going to start bringing in scales into the Beis HaMikdash as if you're not allowed to bring scales. The Yachnis, so the Gemara says, is there a problem with bringing scales into the Beis HaMikdash? To which the Gemara says, yes. Kevan de beklala ksiv lav orach ara. This is actually quite amazing. I would say scales are mentioned in the Torah in the context of the tochacha. Where are scales mentioned in the context of the tochacha? So if you look at Rashi, Rashi says over Kevan de beklala ksiv ve'shivu lachmechem b'mishkal. When the Torah is speaking about the famines that are mentioned in the tochacha, it says they will give you back your bread in measured amounts. In other words, the bread will be rationed. It will be measured out and given to you, because ultimately, again, the one time that scales are mentioned in the Torah, legabe bread, it's by klala. Therefore, we do not bring scales into the Beis HaMikdash. Quite amazing. Therefore, again, about say halacha l'maisa, when going in and splitting the dough for the menachos for the minchas chavitin, we go ahead and we split it by hand and not by kli. Shulchan, what's another interesting kasha? Shulchan, ma'ushi kaddish kematzim begodesh shalo. So the Gemara says, listen to this kasha. Both say, we know that on the shulchan you put the lechem apanim, you put the loaves of bread, and you also put 2 spoonfuls of frankincense, what we call the bazichin shel levona. So those spoons were placed on top of the shulchan. When the spoons were placed there, so ultimately again the frankincense becomes kaddish. The Gemara is asking a different kasha over here. What happens if you placed the levona, the frankincense, directly on the shulchan itself without the spoons? Does placement on the shulchan, is that mekadesh the frankincense or not? So do we say, so in other words, begodesh labasa means the airspace. Mekadesh lechem kimatzana mekadesh. Do we say, since the shulchan is mekadesh the loaves of bread, therefore what? When you put the frankincense on the shulchan itself without the spoons, you put it on the shulchan itself, so the frankincense becomes kaddish as well. O dilma, the chazi le mekadesh, the lo chazi le mekadesh. Or do we say no? The reason that the shulchan is mekadesh the loaves of bosa is why? Because they belong there. The frankincense does not belong directly on the shulchan. Where does the frankincense belong? Where does it belong? In the spoons, which then are placed on the shulchan. But if you go in and you place the frankincense on the shulchan itself, it does not become kaddish. Amar lei, eino mekadesh. if you just place the levona directly on the shulchan itself without the bazich, without the spoons, the levona does not become kaddish. Ini, is that true? So the Gemara says, so I'll say, according to the opinion who held that each loaf of the lechem aponim was 2.5 tefachim high, so also remember again, the loaves were arranged in rows of 6, piles of 6, two piles of 6. So if you hold that the loaves were each 2.5 tefachim tall, then it turns out that the shulchan is mekadesh at an airspace of 15 tefachim, the height of the 6 loaves. But according to the opinion who hold that the loaves were only 12 tefachim high, 2 tefachim high each, Nimtza shulchan mekadesh should base tefach lamala. Then it turns out that what? That the shulchan ultimately again is mekadesh at a height of 12 tefachim. So we'll say, what do you see from here? What do you see from here? That what is the Gemara seemingly saying? That the shulchan, the airspace of the shulchan, has the ability to be mekadesh items. The machlokes is how high the airspace of the shulchan goes up. That machlokes, we'll say, is rooted in what? The height of the respective loaf of the lechem aponim. Was a particular loaf 2 tefachim high, 12 tefachim high? Does the shulchan have airspace of 15 tefachim, 12 tefachim? Okay, so that's a machlokes. But one thing, what the Rabbi seems to be saying is what Rabbi said. The shulchan, the airspace of the shulchan has the ability to be mekadesh. What does that mean? That the airspace of the shulchan has the ability to be mekadesh? Rabbi say, well, pashtus, what that means is that if you place something on the shulchan, then what? It becomes kadosh, which would then seemingly mean that for our case, if you take the levona, we know ideally the levona is supposed to be placed in the spoons. The spoons are placed on top of the shulchan. But what it sounds like over here is if you took the levona and you placed it on the shulchan itself, then what? Then halacha l'maaseh it should become kadosh. Yet we just said before that what? It does not become kadosh. To which the Gemara says, "Amalei ema mekadesh lekarev, aval mekadesh lepaso." To which the Gemara says, "You're right. It does become kadosh. We will say it doesn't become kadosh if you place lavona on the shulchan itself. It doesn't become consecrated in a sacrificial way that it can be offered up, but it does become kadosh in that it has the ability to become disqualified. As Rashi points out over here in the end of Rashi Kisvei Yad, Avam Kadosh Lipasal Bitvul Yom Biyotze Kadosh Lipasal Ki'ilu Kadosh Bazichin Atzman. So I'll say, interestingly enough, if you place the lavona on the shulchan itself, not in the spoons, the shulchan is mekadesh in that the levona could become sacrificially disqualified. If a tvul yom touches it, becomes disqualified. If it's taken outside of the Beis Hamikdash, it could become disqualified. But what? To be offered up on the Mizbeach, that you cannot do until the point that the levona itself is placed in the spoon. So we see placement on the Mizbeach endows an entity with sacrificial sanctity for disqualification purposes. But placement on the shulchan itself does not necessarily endow it with sacrificial sanctity in order to allow it ultimately to be offered up on the Mizbeach. So we'll stop over for today. I just want to remind everyone, we started Baruch Hashem a brand new sefer today called Chovas HaTalmidim, which is a beautiful, beautiful sefer, ultimately by the Piazetzna, an incredible sefer that teaches us, gives us the necessary midos to become the type of kelim which could absorb the Dvar Hashem, which could absorb the lessons of life. We'll say it's incredibly important, if possible, to try to start the day with the Seder at 5:45. I know in these, since we've gotten to Kudshim, so again, some people have fallen off the grid. Those who haven't fallen off the grid sometimes try to come, it's not easy to sit through an entire 45 minutes of this. So sometimes you try to, we'll say, if this is your learning for the day, you have to maximize it. If this is your kvias itim, then then if you're going to do it, then you got to do it. Shir starts at 5:45. Unless you have another Musar Seder throughout the day. If you have another Musar Seder, then of course learn Musar wherever you're going to learn. But I will say, if you're going to come, then come. And even more than that, if you come once the shir started, we move at a breakneck speed. If you're coming once the block started, let's be honest, you're lost or playing catch up for the rest of the daf. It's hard enough to get something from the daf because we compact so much information ultimately into 45 minutes. If you're making the commitment anyway to come, an extra couple of minutes waking up earlier, you're not going to feel any more tired. And the extra 7, 8, 15 minutes of sleep, you're not going to feel any more rested. So if you're doing it, then do it. Rabbi say, get here for the Musar Seder. Learn the holy words of the Piazetzna. Don't get 80% of a daf, which I don't understand at all. Get 100% of the daf, which I understand 85%. Right? Rabbi say, there's something, meaning, if this is your kaviyas, again, if you're just auditing Daf Yomi and you have a real Seder Halimud, at night, my words do not apply to you. But if this is where you're coming to the Beis Medrash to learn, 5:42 is a fantastic time to get here. Get your coffee, get settled, get in an hour of real learning. A little bit of Hashkafa, Chovas HaTalmidim, a lot of Meseches Menachos, and make this your real Kaviyas. This is a great time to restart. It's a Monday. We just started Mamish, a brand new Sefer in Chovas HaTalmidim. I'm putting it out on the WhatsApp. Let's be stark. Let's grow. If we're going to do this, then let's sink our teeth into it and really do it. And Amir Hashem, Chodesh Baruch Hu will see our renewed vigor. It's again, we're in the middle now of the winter Zman. We're finishing up Cheshvan. We're getting into Kislev. It's time to stoke the fire a little bit. And Amir Hashem, we should have a fulfilling Zman together.